Madam Chair, committee members, and participants, we are now live.
Thank you. We are now convening the Committee on Appropriations today, Thursday, April 21st. Good afternoon, everyone. Before we begin this public hearing, I will make the following announcement. Due to the continuing threat of public health from COVID-19 and the variants, City Council committees are currently meeting remotely. We are using Microsoft Teams to make these remote hearings possible. Instructions for how the public may view and offer public testimony at public hearings of council committees are included in the public hearing notices that are published in the Daily News, Inquirer, and Legal Intelligencer prior to the hearings, and can also be found on philacouncil.com. I know that the hour has come. Clerk, will you please call the roll to take attendance? Members that are in attendance, please indicate that you are present when your name is called. Also, please say a few brief words when responding so that your image can be displayed on screen when you speak. Clerk?
Good afternoon, everyone. The roll call is as follows. Madam Chair Quinones Sanchez.
Present.
Councilmember Kenyatta Johnson.
Present.
Councilmember Isaiah Thomas.
Present. Good afternoon.
Councilmember Brian O'Neill. Councilmember David O. Councilmember Alan Dom.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and colleagues present.
Councilmember Catherine Gilmore Richardson.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, colleagues. I am present.
Thank you. A quorum of the committee is present, and this hearing will now be called to order. This is a public hearing on the Committee on Appropriations regarding Bill number 220291. Clerk, will you please read the title of the bill?
Bill number 220291. Authorizing transfers and appropriations for fiscal year 2022 from the general fund, certain or all city offices, departments, boards, and commissions, the grants revenue fund, certain or all city offices, departments, boards, and commissions, and the aviation fund, certain or all city offices, departments, boards, and commissions, to the general fund, certain or all city offices, departments, boards, and commissions, and the aviation fund, certain or all city offices, departments, boards, and commissions.
Before we begin to hear testimony from our witnesses we have here for today, everyone who's been invited to the meeting to testify should be aware that the public hearing is being recorded. Because the hearing is public, participants and viewers have no reasonable expectation of privacy. By continuing to be on the meeting, you are consenting to being recorded. Additionally, prior to recognizing members for questions or comments they will have for our witnesses, I will note that for the record at this time that we will use the chat feature available on Microsoft Teams to allow members to signify that they wish to be recognized. In order to comply with the Sunshine Act, the chat feature must only be used for this purpose. Would you please
Madam
call...
Chair, Councilman O'Neill, I just wanted to be marked present. Thank you.
Thank you. Let the record reflect that Councilmember Brian O'Neill is present. Thank you very much. We have one person for our first panel this afternoon on Bill 220114, which is Marissa Waxman, our Budget Director. Before she gets started, every department related to this transfer ordinance is available. A letter from the budget office was submitted to all members of this committee. Subsequently, through work with our finance director, Robert McDermott, there was a proposed amendment that was also circulated, and then we recently just circulated an updated testimony for our budget director. So we will let Marissa Waxman present, and as I said, all departments are available to answer any questions or concerns from committee member. Welcome.
Yeah. Good afternoon, Chairperson Quinones Sanchez and members of the City Council Committee on Appropriations. My name is Marissa Waxman, Budget Director, and I'm here to testify in support of Bill number 220291. This bill provides amendments to the FY22 operating budget totaling $31,859,198. About half the funds in this mid-year transfer ordinance reallocate funds that will go unspent this fiscal year, either due to lower than expected costs or delayed hiring and purchases in some areas, and send that to new and needed expenses. Many of the changes reflect funding shifts between classes within a department rather than an increase in the overall level of departmental funding. This includes the requests for police, fire, the managing director's office, health, and finance. Police seeks to move $600,000 from class 100 to class 200 to fund forensic science work to address a backlog in DNA analysis. Fire requests to shift $2.8 million available due to lower than budgeted payments to the water fund to support disposal and replacement of fire suppression foam that is environmentally problematic, as well as for EMS supplies and billing. MDO would move $6 million that will not be spent in class 100 by the end of the year to support one-time purchases by MDO, and shift another $3 million to OIT to support the purchase of public safety radios. The full amount of class 100 remains in the budget for FY23 to enable filling of the positions. The one-time MDO purchases include vehicles to support the school crossing guard program, medical examiner equipment, AID equipment for the police department's major crash response, COVID PPE for the prisons, environmental improvements for the anti-violence programs in pinpoint areas, language access materials, tactical entry equipment, and contraband mail and body scanners for the prisons. Parks and Rec looks to redeploy $550,245 of Class 100 for summer program rentals, Storm Ida cost, emergency cleanup in Kensington, Phase 1 assessment of recreation centers to modernize Advisory Council collections and AED replacement. Health would like to move $242,000 from Class 100 to Class 200 for gun violence research. Finance wants to reallocate $10,000 from Class 200 to Class 300 for remote work IT equipment. There are several areas where net new funding is needed, either in whole or in part. This shift from the grants fund to the general fund of $16.3 million will support 7 of the 10 million for public safety radios funded in OIT. These radios are at the end of life, and they were scheduled to for replacement in the pre-pandemic version of the FY21 budget. We really kicked the can on that, and we had delayed the replacement due to the revenue losses at the time. The other 3 million would be coming from MDO's Class 100, which I mentioned earlier. There would be $2.9 million for public property. Of that, $2.5 million is to support the work at the City Commissioner's new warehouse. As an aside, we know that the City Commissioners have requested an additional $3.9 million in this fiscal year for operations, and we are able to accommodate that without a transfer ordinance at this time. The balance of the funds for DPP is for COVID-related cleaning. There's $2.8 million for the Department of Fleet Services for fuel and parts. The bulk of this is for fuel necessitated by the dramatic rise in gas prices following the Russian invasion of the Ukraine. There's $2.6 million to the Law Department for legal services that cannot be performed in-house due to a combination of capacity constraints, conflicts, and the need for targeted expertise. $457,312 requested to continue a COVID recovery and isolation site under the Office of Homeless Services budget. And additionally, there are requests for $250,000 or less for labor, the mayor's office, and the sheriff. Within the Aviation Fund, transfers are requested for $400,000 for insurance costs and shipping $2 million from operating to capital to reduce outstanding commercial paper for administrative costs. I'm joined by representatives of the departments impacted by this legislation, and we are available to answer your questions. Thank you. Madam Chair, I believe you're on mute.
Thank you, Marissa. Before we proceed, can you review the amendments that we're proposing and whether the administration is in support of them?
So we received those last night, and we're happy to talk with you. I actually have not been able to talk with Rob Dubois, who's out of the office today, and the rest of the folks to get our position, but we are happy to talk about those.
Okay. So we obviously will submit them for the record. There is $100,000 from the general fund and $493,000 from the grants revenue for a total of $593 to Class 200 in the City Council budget. There is a $250 contribution to the Adunda Festival, $200 from the grants revenue to Class 500, and then there's an additional $836,000 for personal protection equipment, bulletproof vest, riot gear, for the grants revenues to equipment for existing personnel. So I just want to put that on the record. So as we're talking about this, we know what we're talking about for the record. Real quickly, I have a couple of questions and then I'll open it up to my colleagues. Let me get this chat room going in case I missed something. There's a lot of questions queued up, but let me start. During the budget process, and in particularly this week, there's been a lot of discussion around planning and infrastructure. And I'll give you an example. This week, we had the fleet manager speak a little bit about EV cars and infrastructure, and he said that there was going to be an establishment of a committee. Has the administration developed a plan that is broader than our fleet to discuss EV infrastructure in the city? And if so, who's working on that?
So I believe, as the head of the Department of Fleet Services testified, a group is being pulled together, and I can get back to the chair with more information about who is involved. And I believe that it goes beyond just, what we drive around, but also what the future of electric vehicles will be. I'm sure they're also thinking about self-driving vehicles. What does that entire ecosystem wind up looking like? So I will touch base with the agencies that I suspect are involved to get the full list back to you.
Yes, so this is very important. As you know, there are timely, competitive federal grants that will be available for infrastructure. We've all seen Secretary Buttigieg travel all over the country, so it would be really important, particularly before the end of our budget process, that we can at least say we're planning, there's a plan, there's something funded to discuss EV infrastructure, particularly as it relates to our public properties, but particularly on the equity issue, right? We've seen in other cities, as we've looked, the default has been for EV infrastructure to be put on parking lots, and others, we want to make sure that there is a discussion about EV infrastructure in all neighborhoods, right? So that's important. And the other discussion that came up, and it's part of this transfer ordinance, I'm going to ask you, the issues of radios that is in here, and I'm sure some of my colleagues will have questions, and also cameras. And in fact, yesterday there was a lengthy discussion with our OIT about the different departments with different camera services and the ability for them to talk to each other. Can you speak to me, is there any planning around incorporating one camera program as inclusive? I'll use for an example, CCTV in London. London spent millions of dollars building an infrastructure that speaks to each other and incorporates their public transit, neighborhoods, like all of these things. What is the discussion, given that there's been such a level of frustration with police cameras versus the dumping cameras versus the commercial Carter cameras now? We've been subsidizing cameras in commercial Carters. Is there any discussion about using infrastructure opportunities to create one system that talks to each other?
Thank you so much for that question. And yeah, following yesterday's conversation, touched base with OIT yesterday afternoon, was talking with Streets, and what we clearly realized is we need to be having some more conversations around that, and opportunities layered onto that is obviously any IIJA or bipartisan infrastructure legislation funding. We're currently in the process of assessing what are all of the opportunities there. Which ones, are we going to go after and make the most sense for us? And that's in part why the FY23 budget does have the proposed funding for the staff, so that we can make sure that we have the capacity to, come up with a real strategy as opposed to a hodgepodge of ideas. So that's in process now. We're talking about how do we get that stood up, and we're talking about specific opportunities, and we can and I know that Bob McDermott is involved in some of those conversations, so we make sure to include council in. Can you speak a little bit
to who is on that committee? I think it's hugely important. There's a lot, it's a common theme in every single departmental discussion. What is the committee structure to review competitive opportunities with federal money? What's that infrastructure? And as you mentioned, Bob McDermott is sitting in on that on behalf of City Council, but what other departments are part of that?
Sure, I can absolutely. I believe we actually have an org chart that I can forward to the chair, because it is a fairly large group, and it also includes other folks outside of the administration, but definitely Otis and Streets, but airport and other outside entities. We have our capital budget folks from the budget office. There are a number of offices on there. I'm not going to remember everybody right now, but we can send over an org chart to the chair.
where would this committee sit? Is this something that's led by the finance office, or where is this sitting as it relates to the administrative structure of government?
I'll need to get back to you because it goes above me and I'm not recalling where that is, but we built it off of a structure that we had put in place for the COVID response and recovery, because that was a way that we were able to do real collaborative interdepartmental and inside-outside government. And so we built it on that structure because it was working well, and we knew how we could sort of tweak that and keep it going.
Okay. Will there be a director for that committee that can come before council to speak to what the opportunities are? Are you looking at that kind of formality, or is this just staff having another task to do? I mean, how serious and how much are we upgrading the need to have someone in charge and accountable?
So I will pull together the information about how it is structured right now, and also what was proposed with the new operating budget funding. But we include a $20 million proposal for staffing this up, which I think demonstrates a real level of seriousness around this.
Okay. How would this committee have access, and therefore council have access to see how this can change our capital budget as proposed right now, right? Because you're going to stand up this committee. How are we going to make decisions about what is really shovel ready versus what is 18 months behind? Speak to me about that conversation.
Yeah, so part of the reason why the FY 23 to 27 capital program, 28 capital program includes funding for matching funds, but doesn't have that allocated out to departments yet, it sort of sits in finance where we have flexibility, is because we knew we didn't know everything right now. And so what we are expecting to do as we stand this up is understand all sorts of things. What projects are we going after? When will we need the money in the timeline? What is the match percentage? And is that going to factor into, a program with a 5% match versus a 25% match? How's that going to factor into our decisions? So we built in some flexibility, and we can, as we're sort of building out what this process and structure looks like, we can obviously, council will be involved.
Thank you for that. During the budget discussions also this week, so I want to kind of put it on the record because there have been a lot of discussions around this. Over the last few years, we've the council president's office, Bob McDermott, myself, and Council President Clark, we really have been trying to navigate the independent budget, the requests from the independent elected offices. And I just want to put this on the record because I think it's hugely important. And this is not necessarily for you as much as it is for the mayor and the mayor's team. Independent elected officials get elected by the electorate with a mandate to do their jobs, right? And our role is to be fiscally responsible and prudent with the work that they do. And I think it's hugely important, as you heard from the testimony from Chairwoman Deely. We've had this discussion around the sheriff's office. We've had it with all of the independent offices. Obviously, I've done some advocacy for the DA's office. I really want, over the next couple of months as we close out this budget, to better align what the expectations are by the mayor and the policymakers as it relates to these independent goals, and some cases charter mandated mandates around the structure and what these independent offices do, so that we can get to a better place and how we manage it. Chairman Deely speaks for herself, as will the Sheriff Belial and others, but I think we need to have the mayor more involved in how some of these discussions play into, again, how they independently got elected and their mandates. And I think it's important. I know your role as the budget officer is to ask the questions that you have to ask around the management of the money, but it's a reoccurring theme, and I don't want my council colleagues to think that we're not aware of it and that we're not engaged in it. But I think it requires attention of the mayor and the chief of staff around these relationships and how they're managed. I just wanted to put that in the record because, I heard the questions my council colleagues asked of Chair Lady Deely, and others. And I just want you to know, folks to know that we have been working with the budget office around these other, as much as we possibly can, but this is a policy and sometimes a political will conversation that we need to bump up to the mayor and to the chief of staff. So I'm just putting that on the record because we're going to have other people testify in the upcoming week who are not satisfied with their budget allocation as proposed by the administration. And I just want to get ahead of that and, you know, kind of put in context the conversation that you had and we're having with the city commissioner's office. I just want to put that on the record for all my colleagues. I want to see, is anybody here from the recreation department? Because I want to get some responses to this Kensington allocation.
I'm here. Councilwoman Sanchez, Catherine.
Commissioner, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good, good. So you have a request here for a certain allocation for summer programming, including an emergency cleanup in Kensington. Can you briefly speak to that?
Sure. So we have been talking to some of the community leaders in Kensington for quite some time and understand the significant quality of life issues that you know, have existed there, specifically around our parks and public spaces, and have wanted to really do more and do better in terms of helping to address, especially the, you know, the cleanliness issues and the maintenance issues in the park. We have great operations staff who, led by a wonderful district supervisor, Tito Lugo, who has, you know, runs a crew who maintains the parks in and around Kensington, but it's a very wide area that they have to patrol, so they only hit each park twice a week. Our great partners at CLIP also support the maintenance efforts in the parks in Kensington, but it's just not proven to be enough to keep up with the amount of, you know, just trash and litter and, you know, other things that need to be cleaned up in those parks. And so we have contracted with a nonprofit called CEO that we've worked with in the past, who is, as you probably know, it's a nonprofit that works with individuals coming out of, you know, placement and who are reentering their communities, and employs them to do work like this in parks. So CEO is now working 5 days a week with us in Kensington. They're going around, I believe, to 4 parks. And working, you know, alongside our operations crews, but also independently. We've seen a tremendous difference. In fact, we had a call with some of the Kensington leaders yesterday, and they noted that they've seen a significant impact from those efforts. So we're happy that we've been able to that we've been rerouting some of those funds to go to support that work. So they're out there 5 days a week, I think 6 hours a day. And that's in addition to the to our crews and the CLIP crews who are already providing high levels of maintenance.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner, so much. Yes, I mean, it goes unsaid, or it's not said enough, the amount of work that CLIP and, you know, and the streets department have done in the Kensington area. Just want to tell you what I've said to Jessica Shapiro the other day. You know, we are working really hard at opening school buildings, and I know that there's this plan about programming McPherson Park. Just want to go on the record, you know, sending children where you almost need 1 adult per 1 child to prove a point that we're activating the space. Given the fact that we don't have control of the space, I don't think it's a good utilization of funds, and I really want the administration to rethink that. There's several schools in the area that are open. We have several parks in the area that open. I don't need anybody to prove a point that, you know, we're going to send kids into McPherson when we don't have control of it. You know, I'd rather see us allocate those slots either to the play streets or to the parks that we do have some control over. And I just want to put it on the record again. I know that we have the library staff there and they're very engaged. We need to have a conversation about it, but I think everybody agrees with me that that we don't have control of McPherson Square at this point, and it is very dangerous and will require a lot of police resources and a lot of staffing to program 20-25 slots that we can activate in one of the nearby sites and have safer and better programming. So just want to put it on the record. I did last year too. Nobody listened to me, but I'm okay.
Thank you for that, Councilwoman. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you for all your work. Appreciate. I know that the Harrogate Civic is doing a lot of work at Harrogate Park, and there's a lot of energy around our renovations at Scallon with the Flyers Foundation. So there is a lot of great stuff going on. McPherson is not one of them. So I thank you very much for all your efforts in that. Okay. And then finally, and I'll move it over to my council colleagues. If Liz Hirsch can speak to the isolation site expansion. I know there's been a lot of advocacy. Council's gotten a lot of emails from a lot of the homeless advocates around congregate care and this isolation site. If you can briefly speak to what that would allow you to do.
Yes, good afternoon, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, council members. The Philadelphia Department of Public Health closed the COVID isolation and quarantine hotels about 6 weeks ago. But given the new variants that are coming up and the fact that we are testing people as they enter the shelter system, we felt it was imperative to have an alternative site available for isolation rather than congregate sites where the likelihood of spread is great. And so on the Riverview campus, we do have cottages that are available. And so we have contracted with Resources for Human Development to open up what we're calling the COVID isolation recovery site. To date, we've had 2 people use that site. Neither were symptomatic, thankfully, but they were positive, and that enabled them to be safely isolated and also not spread the virus to others in congregate sites. And as to your question around kind of where do we go from here, we have initiated, thanks to the Office of Emergency Management, a health preparedness planning process for congregate sites in the event of another infectious disease outbreak. This is, again, being led by OEM, but it involves staff of OHS, the Department of Behavioral Health and Intellectual Disability Services, Public Health, and the Managing Director's Office, supporting the work that will be led by a group of homeless services and DBHIDS providers and people with lived experience. Our goal is to have a set of playbooks and flag system for how to respond to future infectious outbreaks as it relates to congregate sites, and to have that work completed by the end of the fiscal year.
Thank you very much for that response.
One other thing, council member, the health preparedness process, we believe will be paid for through FEMA.
Thank you very much for that response. I know there's a broader conversation about moving away from congregate care, and so I appreciate the fact that this appears that you're responding to a lot of the advocacy that we're hearing on council. So I appreciate the fact that there's that alternative site for the summer in response to that. So thank you very much, Liz. One last thing, is anybody here from the Managing Director's Office? We received quite a bit of calls around the school crossing guards moving over to the MDOs. And I just want someone to put something on the record around the issue of union representation, like making sure, can we reassure folks that this does not impact any of their work and their role, because there's a concern out there. And if I got calls, I know my council colleagues got calls. So Mary, is that you?
That's me, council member. Thank you for raising this question. Mary Horseman, Policy Director for the Managing Director's Office. So we are, as we begin this process in 2021, we are transitioning the crossing guard unit to the Streets Department. So we've been working closely with DC 33 to make sure that this is a really smooth transition for all of the crossing guard staff. We know that they've been doing really incredible work throughout this pandemic, and we want to make sure that they continue to be supported. So we do not expect any changes in their representation, and we're working closely with the police department to make sure this is a really smooth transition for everyone involved.
Everybody loves their crossing guard.
We are so proud of our crossing guards.
I love these crossing guards in Kensington. I don't know how they do it. They have every respect from everybody over there. So I want to make sure that our crossing guards, majority women, are taken care of. So thank you very much, Mary, for putting that on the record. And then with that, I'm going to allow some of my colleagues. The chair recognizes Councilmember Dom.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I just want to join Madam Chair in her requests. I hope you can listen to her about what's going on in Kensington, and specifically McPherson. I was there Friday night and Tuesday night, and I wouldn't let any child near that library or that square. It's a disaster. And what she's saying is absolutely accurate. It's really not good at all. My questions are 3 or 4 questions. In the public health, I noticed you're shifting around a few $100,000 to fund gun violence research. So I have 3 questions around that. Is this the first funding being made available for gun violence research in public health is one question. Second is, what's the total budget this fiscal year for gun violence research? And can you give us a number that includes both public health research and anything being funded through the Office of Violence Prevention? And last, and most importantly, what are we learning from the research we're funding? How are we implementing what we're learning, and how should we expect that implementation can change the outcomes? Probably the most important is the last.
Good afternoon, Council. I'm Ryan Taylor. I'm representing Health today. So I can take the first question. I may have to get back to you on the second question and third question. So this funding is moving from Class 100 to Class 200. It's an allocation that recognizes the temporary nature of this specific funding is more appropriate in Class 200. This goes towards the injury prevention group, which is housed in our chronic disease and injury prevention group as well, or division. And that group is focused on reducing preventable deaths and injuries, primarily in the area of firearm violence. The team is committed to the public health approach to firearm violence and really focuses on 4 different areas, or 4 really priorities this year and next year. One is the injury prevention dashboard, and setting that up and making sure that's robust. Second is the Coalition for Hospital-Based Violence Prevention Programs. The third is the injury prevention team is continuing to grow the firearm homicide review team. And then finally, the focus is on the Cure for Violence and Coalition, which is identifying a number of different factors, but it includes identifying a citywide reach for this model, naming common barriers to the implementation, and facilitating better coordination between organizations. So that is response to the question regarding the funding. To your second and third question, I would respectfully ask that I can follow up after this hearing.
So you're saying, is this the first time we're funding this? Is that what I'm hearing, or?
No, this there has been funding. I just want to make sure that I can give you the specific amounts of funding for this team.
But this has been funded in the past. Correct.
This team, the violence prevention team.
And we don't know what the results are from the funding in the past?
So I'm not in a position to answer that question, but I can certainly touch base with the team and get you that answer. We are in a position to answer. It's just that I'm not in that position.
Okay. Well, if you get that to the chair, that'd be helpful. I'm curious to know, the bottom line is what we're investing in. Is it producing results that we help us get this gun violence under control? Or are we wasting money?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. My next question, I guess, is around, it looks like most of the appropriations that are being made from the general fund are being drawn from Class 100 budgets. So the questions around that are, is this related to the staffing shortage? And should we expect more appropriations out of Class 100 before the books are closed this fiscal year? And how are departments deciding how to invest these payroll budgets they don't anticipate spending? And are departments deciding independently, or is the administration coordinating efforts across departments?
Thank you so much, and that's a great question. So you're right, this is in part because we have areas where we're either had new positions that we haven't been able to fill or folks leaving, and we are having these conversations, sort of the budget office, cabinet members with the individual departments. About half of this transfer ordinance reflects movements of funds within departments to do just that. And so when we're saying, okay, we have stuff we want to get done, we would put it in manpower or person power. Can't do that. It's just not going to get spent. We're 7-8 months into the year. Those salaries are never going to get paid. What are our other needs? What else can we do to move the ball forward? And that's where we look particularly at one-time expenditures, though, because we do intend to, or, it's our expectation that in the future we will fill those positions. So we're not totally switching to doing something else, but it's like, okay, but in the short term, we have money that we're not going to spend. We know we have other needs. Can we do something there? And so that's why a lot of what you're hearing is like, say, the public safety radios. We know we need those. We know, that's the chunk. We have more money in the out years of the 5-year plan because it's more than what we're doing here. But this is a thing we can buy right now. Same with the vehicles for the school crossing guards. And so these are conversations that happen within departments, that are doing it totally within, from class 100 to 300, 400. And so those are the conversations that we have, and the department usually recommends it. In a couple of cases, though, where we identify, okay, Department A, you have an underspend. Department B has a critical need, but not an underspend. That's where the budget office particularly says, all right, can we move a little money from here to there? And so we're trying to do both. Let departments figure out the best way that they can get the job done on their own when things don't pan out exactly as they thought from the beginning of the year. And then also rebalance so that, we're not letting critical needs go unmet at the same time while having dollars be unspent.
Are we seeing our service delivery to our residents go down with the shortage of staff?
So that's something that we're monitoring, and that it looks different in different places. It also, you'll see different things happening. So there are some departments where when we don't have enough staff on board to do it, and you'll see that they pivoted to class 200 to build outside, so they're able to maintain. There's other areas where, the services are down. And so in part, that's why we do the performance measures that we collect on a quarterly basis. And so we just closed out the third quarter, and we'll be looking at that right now for our May 15th quarterly city managers report to figure out where are things doing. But departments are constantly tinkering to try and figure out, okay, how to get the job done? If we can't do it this way, can we do it that way?
Is there someone, Marissa, in government who's looking at what's happened the last 2-3 years and saying, because of the pandemic and because of what occurred, there are areas now of the city government that we can operate more efficiently that we didn't think we could do before, but we can, and like we were forced to, so we realized how to do it. Is there someone in government looking at that across the board?
So there are a number of things. Obviously, the budget office, as we go through this process, we try and take what did we do differently or well, where were there efficiencies, what can we change? And so when departments are developing their budgets, that's part, when they ask for new money, we say, okay, well, where would you pull it from? How would you, get this done if we can't add on top? Also, as Stephanie Tipton testified about yesterday at the CAO's budget hearing, because we recognized that, there were some things that we could do on the fly and it didn't require upfront investment. Awesome, let's do it. We have the example of the Department of Revenue that had improvements in their mailroom, and the shift to online services from their folks led to a $243,000 reduction in their postage needs. That's amazing. That's great. This is where we're incorporating that in. Other areas where we do need to make upfront investments to make these sustainable changes. And that's why we have the Operations Transformation Fund, $10 million over 2 years, in which all departments are getting opportunities to request funds to make the investments to enable these either service improvements, efficiency improvements. And there's a multi-departmental team that is evaluating those basically, it's like Shark Tank situation. Saying this is what we propose, this is what we think we can do, and that's led out of the CAO's office looking at that. So we do this a couple different ways, and we talk about it all constantly, because we are definitely have learned in the past couple of years that when we have to, city government can in fact be nimble and do things differently. It's breathtaking and exciting, and like a testament to all the city employees, the way that we stood up new services or pivoted services. Obviously not perfect, but it was a real confidence boost that in a really trying time, we could do stuff differently, and we are.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. I want 2 last quick questions. At the current time, you're talking about police radios. Is every police officer equipped with a cell phone at this point, or not? Not yet.
I believe we have folks from the police on the phone, but in part, you'll notice that in the FY23 budget, there are additional funds for something called police mobility to improve that. I see DC Coulter has popped on.
Yes, good afternoon. Everybody in the police department is not equipped with a cell phone. The districts that have the mobility project are the 22nd, 24th, and 25th, and we are looking to expand that. And this year, in FY23 budget, there was, I think, a commitment of like $2.7 million to help sustain and in some instances expand, but we're not there yet. We do have every PSA lieutenant has a cell phone, and there are key positions in districts and divisions that have them, but we're not nowhere near completely staffed with phones at this point.
Commissioner Coulter, can you, for the sake of the record, because that is a pilot project funded by an outside funder, can you speak to a little bit about that mobility project that we're piloting? And I know I have it in the 24th and the 25th Police District, but for the purposes of the record, what we're trying to build out.
Yes, ma'am, and good afternoon. The purpose of the mobility project, as it was envisioned, was pretty much a dream of our intelligence bureau along with patrol, and currently being funded by the Neubauer Foundation to let us get it off the ground. And what it's designed to do is ensure that police officers have the devices, have the apps, have the real-time information regarding things that are occurring within the area of the mobility project. And the results initially that we were looking for was the crime and violence reduction. What it actually yielded was reduction in that area, but it also yielded tremendous community buy-in because members of the community had access to their officers and they had that ability to send something and get pretty much instant responses when they were sending either emails or crime information or something that was going on in their neighborhood. So it really gave us a benefit that we certainly welcomed. It wasn't what the intention was. It was originally crime driven, but the areas that were picked initially were the 24th, 25th, and 22nd. Also with that project, we were able to get phones into the hands of all of our homicide investigators, which was something that we've talked about at previous council sessions, looking to make sure that those folks can be reached by secondary victims, family members, people who need to get in touch with their investigator without them having to give out their personal number. So we had success. The mayor did commit to Mr. Neubauer and to the organization that we do want to expand this and move it forward. And we're fairly confident that there will be the ability to attract outside funding outside of city government now that there is a commitment to get this moving and expand it even further. But it has had good results in those areas, and the usage, because a lot of our officers assigned to those places are younger officers who really embrace technology and like the opportunity to be able to connect both crime-wise and community-wise to make those areas better.
I mean, I'm like shocked that we don't have this across the board. What would the cost be, Deputy Commissioner, for every police officer to have a cell phone? This is like the basic technology that we don't have in our police. Our public safety is our number one issue, and our police officers don't have cell phones.
So the cost, I can work that up for you. The cost of the cell phone isn't the issue. It's the monthly plan per officer. So we have 6,300 officers, and I believe it's about $60 a month per officer. So the numbers, when you add it up, are pretty staggering as to what the cost is for that plan. So we have 1,000, a little over 1,000 with the mobility project, plus I think an authorization of about 600 or 700 from OIT that's put into the police budget. But it really is the cost. If there was a way to negotiate that down for public service, to say that there doesn't need to be this extravagant of a cost for the use that it's going to be used for public safety, that would be great. But it is.
I'm going to suggest that maybe you go. It's $6,000 a police officer times what? 6,300 police officers. You guys can probably do the math better than me, but it sounds like $6,300,000. We have a budget of $5.6 billion. Seems to me we should be authorizing that like now. Like, public safety is our number one issue. Why are we not making sure the police department has the technology to help us with public safety?
So I would say Obviously, we are working on that commitment. That's why we added nearly $3 million this year to get us there, and we're happy to continue talking through the FY23 budget process.
This is like a no-brainer. Like this should be happening. This is like, how could police officers not have cell phones in 2022?
Council member, and I want to take this moment to thank the Neubauer Foundation and him personally, who's been engaged in this process, piloting this program so that as we incorporate this technology, we know how we use it, how officers can use it and improve, as the deputy commissioner is saying, not only relationships, but improve the reporting of issues in the community is very important. So I agree with you around scaling it up, but I also agree, I also want you to know that piloting it and changing the culture around the utilization, as the deputy commissioner stated, these are younger officers who are embracing this more. There's a training component to it, and then I remind us that we have a quite significant equipment requirement per officer as it is, and this should be added to it, but we can't think of a phone in isolation of the gear and everything else that's part of their negotiated contract. So I just want to put that on the record and thank the Neubauer Foundation while we have a moment for this pilot, and I can say and speak firsthand that it is a great project that we're embracing and the community is responding to.
I've spoken to Joe Neubauer about this several times. I've known Joe for over 40 years. Thank God for him, because he piloted this, okay? Thank God. But we now know that it works. Like, let's just duplicate it. And Deputy Commissioner, I'm 100% in support of funding it for every officer. And I don't see how we can't not support them in this with this technology. It's the most basic. And let me go to my next question, and my last one for now. I see we're increasing the budget for the mayor's crisis communication team. Looks like $100,000 increase. Is there anything that we should be concerned about for that increase?
So in the transfer ordinance?
Mayor's, crisis communication team. It says.
Oh, in the mayor's office, crisis communications. I believe Kathy Loney is here to maybe speak to what that is for. Thank you, Kathy.
It's just to help with answering reporters' questions and such. And it's nothing we need to worry about. It's more managing the current crises that we all have as opposed to anything going forward.
So we need
Sorry, this is the court
$100,000.
reporter. Who is that speaking?
I'm Kathleen Loney.
Thank you.
So I just want to make sure that I heard that we need $100,000 to answer reporters' questions.
It's for the contract. It's actually only $50,000. We're moving $50,000 out of class 100 into class 200.
What's the other $50,000 for?
Excuse me?
It's a total of $100,000, but you're saying $50,000.
Yes, the contract will be a total of $100,000.
But half of it's for helping answer questions for reporters?
Not sure. I can get back to you with the exact.
Okay. I was just concerned when it said, $100,000 increase for crisis communication team. I didn't know what was going on.
Okay, yes, I can get you the details on what the RFP is for.
All right, thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Dom. So we will get that RFP related to the outside contractor for crisis management. The chair recognizes Councilmember Thomas.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Couple of questions. My first question, we have requested information around property assessments because we understand that once we have some foundational understanding of where we are as it relates to property assessments and city revenue, it'll give us a better view of the city's revenue and the city's fiscal status. So I'm wondering where we are with that and how that's going to impact some of the financial decisions that you're asking us to make today.
Great. Thank you for the question. So we do not yet have all the details on the property assessments. My understanding, and I can get back to you with an updated timeline, is in the next couple of weeks we will have those. We don't anticipate that those will impact any of the decisions in this bill for FY22 because those new assessments will impact the tax bills and relief programs and rates after the close of FY22. But it definitely will inform our conversations around relief programs, rates, as well as investments that we want to make. And so we are anticipating that once we have that information, that'll open up a much broader conversation once we have a sense of scale.
Thank you, Marissa. When you say couple, do you mean couple like 2 or do you mean couple like 8?
I'm going to get that information. I know that we are expecting it in plenty of time to be able to have that conversation before we have to complete the FY23 budget. But I will have to go back and see exactly how far from that we are right now.
Okay, that would be helpful for us because we're trying to balance a lot, and I understand that these the cleanup that we're doing right now is not necessarily parallel to it, but we're using our fiscal hat and fiscal lens to think about all this stuff.
Yes.
Couple other questions. I want to go back to the gun violence research. I've been in a lot of hearings. I haven't missed the appropriations hearing. I go to a lot of the special committee on gun violence hearings. I've never heard about money being allocated for any gun violence research. So I'm glad to see that it's done. But based on Councilmember Downs' questioning earlier, I'm told that this is not the first time. Do you have any information on anything that's been done in the past specifically related to gun violence research?
So I believe that Ryan Taylor from Health has indicated that he'll be able to go back and get some more information on that. There's definitely a number of different things.
Just a quick point of information. Last budget cycle, Councilman Thomas, myself, and Councilman Jamie Gaudier provided funding to the health department. Actually, we followed up with you, Marissa, as well, in terms of the allocation of that funding for research to be done around a health collaborative of all of the hospitals and coming up with a comprehensive plan on how we address trauma and gun violence here in the city of Philadelphia. That was the last budget cycle. So that's a little bit of information.
Councilman, just for clarity purposes, was that something that was done specifically on a research side, or was it something that done to collect the data and inform current practices? Because this gives me the impression that we're supposed to do a dive into like some type of research. I mean, it's very vague right now, but I'm just seeing if this is parallel to what you and the council member advocated for, if we're talking about the same thing.
Yeah, I thought research and data collection was around the same thing, all right, in terms of addressing the issue around trauma, but most importantly, the collaborative of all the hospitals. But if you want additional information, Isaiah, then they have to provide it to you. Excuse me, Councilman Thomas. But I do know we provided funding to the health department to do a deeper dive around the health, I call it a health initiative collaborative around gun violence.
And Councilman, did you guys get feedback on what the outcome of that was or no?
No, I've been pretty busy, but now that I'm back, I'll get a chance to follow up and see, get an update.
Thank you, Councilman. Thank you, Marissa.
Thank you, members. I think it's real important. There's a whole harm reduction unit at the health department that looks at many issues, gun violence being one of them. And we should absolutely get the health department to give us a copy of that structure because, they're the folks working on the safe injection site. They're the folks working on the wound care. They're some of that prevention work that's being done. And we should get a full report around the unit, how much staff is dedicated to it, because there's quite a bit of folks assigned to that unit and the work that they're doing. So we will make sure that the budget office submits that over to you, Councilman.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for the clarity. On the police side, the money that we're allocating for forensics to be able to address backlogs and cases, can you just give us a little explanation on what you expect the outcome will be once we see those dollars transfer? What will it provide for you, and what can we expect to see as a result of the dollars being spent on forensics? I'm always a fan of advocating for money spent on forensics.
Sure. Good afternoon. What that really is giving us an opportunity because of capacity to get more of the backlog done, but it means we have to contract some of it out. And by doing so, we're moving the money from class 100 to class 200 to make sure that we don't have something sitting that hasn't been analyzed yet because of capacity when we have the ability to have a qualified lab doing that work for us. So piloting, getting some additional things that we hadn't been able to do in the past, like some ballistic evidence and taking things from maybe shell casings or other evidence that hadn't been all processed in the past if there wasn't a victim, to get that all caught up, get all that information in the system. And truthfully, the number could be much larger, but we only have 3 months left of the fiscal year. So that's what we can spend in this short amount of time to get some of that backlog done. So it's just doing more work, getting more things done, but contracting it out because of capacity.
Deputy Commissioner, I don't want to be too long with this, so just very briefly, how often do we? I mean, first of all, I think that's great. How often do we do that? How often do we? And excuse my ignorance, but how often do we contract out to outside parties to be able to help address backlogs with forensics?
I couldn't give you the frequency, but I know that Director Garvey would be able to provide that to you. It's a shared response. I know that there's some stuff that we contract out, some stuff that we do in-house, and a lot has to do with either the expertise or the capacity to do it based on the number of personnel that we have and the size of our lab. But I could get him to give you a breakdown each year of what gets done in-house and what gets contracted out.
That would be great. I would definitely appreciate that. Would help for some of the advocacy that we've done around local procurement, as well as just the idea of advocating for more initiatives around public safety. My last thing before I go, actually, you know what? Never mind. Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate it. Everyone, I appreciate all the work that you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Thomas. I know this forensic issue continues to pop up. It's something the DA's office has talked about and others. So I applaud the department trying to move that forward and clearing the homicide rate. So with that, the chair recognizes Councilmember Catherine Gilmore Richardson.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Madam Chair, and thank you all for this hearing. I just wanted to start where you stopped earlier in your questioning, Madam Chair, following up on your question around EV infrastructure and the Infrastructure Bill Committee. I just wanted to ask the administration, are there representatives from the Office of Sustainability's Resiliency Team and the Energy Office on that committee? And how is the committee considering environmental justice and climate change impacts as you all consider next steps on the infrastructure bill?
Thank you, council member. I will, as I said earlier, I don't know off the top of my head what that team looks like. I would suspect that sustainability is certainly involved because they've been talking. I literally was talking with them this morning about EV infrastructure, but we'll get back to you with an understanding of who's working on EV infrastructure, what the charge and mission of that group is, and the scope.
Okay, excellent. So we'll await that information to the chair. Additionally, I had a question specifically and a concern regarding the $10 million appropriation to the Office of Innovation and Technology. You all have a request to fund police safety radios. And I think the letter states that it'll be partially offset by an intra-departmental transfer of $3 million from the managing director's office. And so recently I met with members of the 5th Police District, wherein I learned that police radios are not operable in the area bounded by Ridge Avenue to the west, Northwestern Avenue to the north, Wissahickon Valley Park to the east, and Wises Mill Road to the south. And so this is not only of great concern to the officers that are working in this area, but to the citizens that we represent, because if there's any incident or accident or anything that takes place in that area, they are not able to connect to get, any help or support for our constituents. And so as we deliberate this potential transfer, I just wanted to put it on the record to let you know about that, B, ask if there is a solution, and C, if there is not a solution for that particular area, I am not in position to support this bill until that issue is resolved.
Councilmember, thank you so much for raising that. And I am delighted to be able to tell you that OIT and public safety folks are aware and working on that issue. Next month in May, they will be doing a test in that area for, I'm going to get the IT wrong, but basically like an antenna booster for the signal. The reason they can't do it yet is we need to wait for there to be more leaves on the trees, because we need to make sure that the proposed solution can actually send a signal through all of the leafy trees over there. And they're expecting, though, that should the pilot work next month, they'll be looking at how to fund this booster with a combination of PEMA 911 grant dollars and capital dollars.
Okay, so can you just talk about the timeline relative to the specific request in this bill around the funding of the police safety radios? Like, what is the timeline? When do you want to purchase?
Certainly. So the public safety radios, we need to replace them sort of citywide, police, prisons, fire. And we needed to start doing that in FY21 pre-pandemic. And so the idea of putting that funding in this transfer ordinance is letting us sort of catch up from 2 years. I'm not sure if folks from OIT, Kristinato or Nadine Dodge are on this call and able to speak to how quickly we'll be able to get that up. But we can certainly, if they are not, get back to you with the anticipated timeline. But this is going to be a multi-year initiative. Oh, great, Nadine.
Yeah. So timeline for the radios.
Your name for the record, please.
Oh, I do apologize. Nadine Dodge, Deputy CIO for Office of Innovation and Technology. So I heard two parts of that question. The first is the deployment of the radios. So we would, as Marissa stated, we did plan to begin that refresh a couple of years ago, and because of the issues with obtaining funding during COVID, we did delay that. So currently there are 7,500 radios in existence being used by prisons, fire, and police. Total cost of replacement is $35 million. So that $10 million would put us well on our way to begin the replacement of the fleet of radios that are in the field. So we would be beginning that effort as soon as we obtain the money. We would encumber that funding and start to deploy those radios. As far as the remediation for the coverage issues that you mentioned, it was an issue we're aware of. We do have that coverage testing scheduled for May. The remediation of the coverage issues involve the installation of a bidirectional amplifier on a high point out in that area. That's a cost of between $1 and $1.5 million. We have identified funding sources, as Marissa stated, for that. That will be months, not weeks of effort. But once we have that coverage testing, the coverage testing results, I'm happy to share with you the schedule as soon as we have it for that remediation effort.
Okay, that'll be exceedingly helpful. I understand that time is of the essence based on your response. Marissa, you talked about additional capital needs to ensure that OIT and the necessary coverage is available in this area, and that you all have already undertaken this process. Are the capital dollars there in order to get this done?
So that's, I think, what Nadine was saying, is that we're looking at the PEMA 911 grants and that we're identifying within the capital budget funding for that. So I think I'll double check with the OIT folks, but I think we're good with being able to figure out the solution. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. Nadine has nodded. We're good.
Okay. And so I'm just asking that question for the record because I did hear the response, but I want to ensure that there is nothing additional do to ensure that that work moves forward, because it is my understanding that this issue has been happening for a very long time and it has not been addressed. And so I want to ensure that we have a process in writing to address this issue again before I can be supportive of this bill.
Great. We can certainly get back to you with a write-up of what the game plan is and confirming that the funding is in place.
Okay, and if you could submit that to the chair and to all of my colleagues for their information.
Absolutely.
Okay, excellent. And then lastly, I wanted to go back to the issue that Madam Chair mentioned regarding the school crossing guards. And I heard your answer, but I just wanted to get that on the record because as Madam Chair stated, I too receive the calls about that issue and sort of the uneasiness from the crossing guards relative to being moved from department to department. And they also mentioned their ability to interface, not only with the schools, but with the police officers as they're doing their work in the community. And so I just wanted to ensure that regular communication was taking place with the crossing guards and with their leadership so they are comfortable with all the next steps that will be taking place over the next several weeks and months.
So I'm glad DC Coulter jumped in as well, but thank you for the question, Council Member. So we are dedicated to making sure that this is a very smooth transition, and we recognize that the police department are going to be critical partners in this transition throughout. They play a critical role in public safety and school safety every day, and when the crossing guards transition over, that's not going to change. And so we have a monthly check-in with the labor leadership. And we're communicating with the crossing guards directly to let them know about this change. But our goal is for this to be seamless for the crossing guards so that they can continue to focus on their job of making sure that students are safe. And then we will work on in the background to make sure that the transition is smooth. But DC Coulter, anything you'd want to add?
Yes, just with regards to police, they will always be a resource and a partner to us, and there's not going to be any change in the value of that relationship. They have been and will continue to be eyes and ears for police. They're a great assist. They're truly a great partner. And I've spoken with their union leadership, made sure that they know that our district roll call rooms will always be available for them to have meetings. There'll always be that relationship that officers will still stop, check on them, make sure that, information that they know is being communicated. So I think all
Just a point of information, Deputy Commissioner Coulter. I think it's important. There's a reporting thing, right? Right now, they report to the districts. Can you speak to operationally? Do they still go to the district? How's that going to change? Because I think what they're feeling, and again, the apprehension of, because when they go report in, and then when they're reporting out, they have direct access to captains and police officers to respond right to the things that they hear. So how's that going to change? Are they still reporting through that mechanism?
Geographically, they'll still be assigned in those same districts and those same locations that they are. So for the purpose of communications and crime and safety, they'll always have that access. Their chain of reporting will be different in their new department, yet they're never going to be separated from, if you're in the 24th district, you're still going to have access to the 24th district, the police officers, the commanding officers, for any of that information exchange, whether it's good or bad or something that has to be communicated. So that will always exist, and the police officers will always know that they are that partner in their neighborhood. I think whoever they reported to was never important to the police officer or the crossing guard. It was that open line of that we're all here to protect the children and we're all here to make the neighborhood safe. So I'm confident that, our folks from the policing side won't see a difference other than who is, taking care of their payroll and who is their supervisors with regards to the administrative end. But I think from the child safety and policing end, that communications will always be open, and they will still know that those districts are there for them and that they will have the ability to, communicate the same as they always have.
Okay, that is helpful. And I think they were also concerned relative to accidents that happen in their area. So I think that was the crust of the concern that I received. But thank you very much for that response. And Marissa, I just will await the information regarding the 5th police district in that area that we discussed. And I see my colleague, Councilmember Jones, is here. That's in his council district. He co-signed the letter with us that we sent over to the administration regarding this matter. And I thank you for following up and for providing that information in writing so that we have that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilmember Gilmore Richardson. And by the way, welcome to the committee. Prior to your joining the committee, this was an all-male and me committee. So I welcome you to this process and your work. Councilmember Jones, did you want to add anything to the advocacy that Catherine Gilmore Richardson was speaking to?
No, I just wanted, I'm not on your committee, Madam Chair, but I wanted to lend my support to these transfer ordinances. You know, we play a dangerous game of underfunding things and figuring we'll do it later. And sometimes that can be detrimental to public safety. And not to mention democracy as we know it. So I just wanted to join the committee as an observer, and thank you for allowing me.
Thank you. You're a member of leadership. You can come into any committee that you want. Thank you also very much. Are there any other questions for this panel by members of the committee? Seeing none. Is there anyone else here to testify on Bill 220114 whose name hasn't been called and wants to weigh in? Seeing none.
Madam Chair.
I'm sorry. Is that Sheriff Belial?
Yes, it is.
The chair recognizes Sheriff Belial. Please proceed. Put your name for the record and proceed.
Rochelle Belial, Sheriff for the City and County of Philadelphia. To Chairwoman and to all the members of the committee, good afternoon. And I just wanted to chime in, and my team is on here also. You have Tariq El-Shabab, my undersheriff. You have Craig Martin, my budget officer. You have Erica Davenport, my chief of staff. You have John Hodges, who is my HR manager. You have Mike Drucker, who is the director of court and operations. You have Patrick Lee, who is my CFO. You have Kalila Hawk, who is my trainee and program director. And so as our discussion with the amendment to the transfer ordinance, we are dealing with situations that becomes equipment. And if it's, may I proceed? Thank you.
Absolutely, Sheriff Belial. Please proceed.
We have been having conversations with the administration in reference to equipment that is not here and that is desperately needed according to our sheriffs. As you know, I came in as the sheriff on January the 6th, 2020. What I began to uncover was, to me, drastic. I come from a police department that has very much kept up on the equipment that officers needed, especially those in the line of duty. But what I saw here was horrible. My deputies are wearing outdated vests from 2004, but it goes so back forward that what I saw was that they didn't get equipment to come in from a purchase order. They went to a warehouse and they was told to go pick out something, and what they pick out was worse than what I can ever see for anybody. If you notice that we are a part of every large event that happens in this city, we are part of the protests, we are part of the celebrations, we are part of everything that happens in the city. And it's appalling for the administration to not want to fund deputy sheriffs to have equipment that keeps them safe, especially their vests, especially riot gear. We are in a vulnerable state, and for each and every one of them that participate in these events, not to have the proper equipment, to me, is appalling. We have been budgeted for 428 officers, but yet we want to put them out there naked, basically. And so this is why we have asked the administration for the transfer ordinance to the budget so that people can be dressed appropriately, especially our deputy sheriffs, and the equipment to keep them safe. If there are any questions of any of my administration up here, they will give that answer.
Thank you, Sheriff Belial. And in the amendment that we put forward, City Council agrees with you, Council President Clark, around the issue of your bulletproof vest, riot gear, and we have allocated $836,000 to get all of your current members. We have talked to the administration, and I know that you're scheduled to testify for your fiscal 23 budget next week, and we'll continue to work with you as we have around managing some of the work, your charter mandated work, and the work that you're doing in the city of Philadelphia, and work through that process and continue to work with you throughout that process. Do any members of the committee have a question for the sheriff at this point? As I mentioned, there is a $836,000 amendment being submitted by the committee on the sheriff's behalf.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Councilmember Jones. The chair recognizes Councilman Jones.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair, for your indulgence. I just want to say that this isn't our grandparents' sheriff's office. They are proactive. They are a auxiliary to the police department in times of crisis. They are they're a protector of judges. They have a dignitary protection unit. So they have boldly stepped into spaces that 20 years ago they might not have occupied. And for them to step in those spaces, I think, I feel we have an obligation to make sure that they have what the tools that they need. Whether we talk about all of these appropriations that we're looking at today, these aren't wants, they're needs. They're not wants. Nobody's asking for the big new Tahoe car. They're asking for vests. And we just need to be responsible stewards of the budget. And I know I'm not talking to you, Madam Chair, just saying why I wanted to pop on. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Jones. And you were not here when I started my questioning with the budget office. You know, over the last few years, in particular in this role, council under the direction of Council President Clark and obviously Bob McDermott, our finance director, we have found ourselves in many conversations. You heard Chair Lady Dealey speak yesterday around some of her challenges as an independent elected office. We've had the same challenge with our district attorney and with the sheriff's office. And we are committed to work through this budget process to ensure that they have the resources they need as they're independently elected with a mandate and sometimes with a charter mandate to fulfill a responsibility, and professionalizing and supporting and giving folks the equipment they need to do their jobs is our responsibility in council to work with the administration on this. So we're committed to it, and thank you, Sheriff, for coming, and for your entire team for coming and putting that on the record. And again, you will be testifying next week for your full budget, and we look forward to a more robust conversation about the work that you have done since coming into office. So thank you all so very, very much. That will, if there's no one else here, Member Catherine Gilmore Richardson has a quick question. Member Richardson?
Yes, thank you so much, Madam Chair. I just wanted to circle back to ensure that I was clear, because I'm now on my computer and not on my phone, to see if the administration will be submitting something in writing to us before we have to take the vote on this bill regarding the matter I specifically talked about for the OIT issue and the police radios up in the 5th Police District.
So I'll let Marissa, I think her understanding was that it would be submitted before a final vote and not at this committee, but Marissa?
Yeah, we'll be able to probably get that early next week, so before you would need to take a final vote.
Okay, so what I will commit to doing is, voting in favor of this bill today, but I will not do that before the full council unless we have that information in writing so that we can ensure that issue can be resolved.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much, Marissa, and thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. My apologies for the background noise. There's someone who started doing work above me or below us that's making that noise. So this concludes the public hearing, the appropriations public
Madam
hearing
Chair.
on bill number 2201114.
Madam Chair.
We will now go into our public meetings. There being no further questions from members of the committee or other witnesses to testify, I will ask if there's anyone else present. If there's not, hearing none, I want to thank all the panels and witnesses for their participation today. We value your opinions. I now invite all panels and witnesses to please.
Madam Chair.
I'm sorry.
Madam Chair, I think Member Johnson is trying to be recognized.
Oh, hands up. Oh, you don't have access to the chat room. My apologies, Member Johnson, my vice chair. The chair recognizes Member Johnson.
No, that's all right. Well, but I did just want to follow up on Councilman Curtis Jones' comments regarding the Sheriff's Department. It should also not go unrecognized that during the pandemic, when the world fell apart and we didn't know what we were going to do as a city, it was the Sheriff's Department that stepped up and provided additional manpower to keep the city of Philadelphia moving forward. But most importantly, when you talk about the issue of having vests, I was commending the sheriff one time when I saw they had an operation where they were arresting people who had outstanding arrest warrants. And when we talk about the issue of gun violence here in the city of Philadelphia, you still have people who are out and about, who skip bail, who have arrest warrants, and it's the sheriff's department responsibility to apprehend those individuals and bring those individuals to justice. Now, I remember calling the sheriff and commending her because we are living in a city right now that feel like there's a lot of lawlessness going on. And so I commended her and her team for still holding those accountable that think that they can kill, rob, and destroy people's lives and get away with it. And so I'm glad that this council stepped up to the plate, as we always do, and provide the necessary support when it comes to providing the sheriff members their vests. But also, without question, moving forward, it shouldn't even be a question if we're going to provide the necessary resources that they need to be on the front line apprehending individuals. And so, Sheriff Bilal, I just wanted to give you and your team your personal and public accolades, because when we talk about public safety, we cannot diminish the work that the sheriff's office is doing. And so I'm definitely sure if it was police officers saying they need vests, we wouldn't even be having this conversation, because we already know in this upcoming budget process, they are getting a significant increase in a variety of different areas. And so, nevertheless, we know the work that you're doing is just important as well. And so just want to put that on the record.
Thank you, Councilman.
I feel like I got to say amen to that.
I agree, Madam Chair. This is Councilmember
Thank you,
Johnson.
Councilmember Johnson and Councilmember Thomas. Again, I'm going to try this again, and I just want to go on the record and saying that I was saying the wrong bill number. So this concludes the appropriations hearing for bill number 220291. We will now go into our public meeting. The chair will now ask all panels and witnesses to please disconnect from the meeting before we go into the public meeting. Folks can log off.
Aye. Thank you. Team, you can disbark.
We will now convene our public meeting for the Appropriations Committee. The chair will ask that the clerk please call the roll of members who are present, and please, as we always do, say a few brief words so that your image can be displayed on the screen. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Roll is as follows. Madam Chair Quinones Sanchez.
Present.
Councilmember Kenyatta Johnson.
Present.
Councilmember Isaiah Thomas.
Present.
Councilmember Brian O'Neill. Councilmember David O.
Councilmember O'Neill is present.
Councilmember David O. Councilmember Alan Dom.
Present. Thank you.
Councilmember Gilmore Richardson.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and colleagues. I am present.
Thank you. So we have now a quorum. The chair will now recognize Vice Chairperson Johnson for a motion on approving the amendment for Bill 220291. As earlier stated, the appropriations amendment has been circulated to members of the committee. Chair recognizes Vice Chairman Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move that the amendment for Bill number 220291 be adopted from this committee, excuse me, with a favorable recommendation.
Do I get a second?
Second.
All in favor of the amendment, say aye.
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 Any opposition? Seeing none, the amendment to Bill 220291 has been adopted. The chair again recognizes Vice Chairman Johnson for a motion on approving the amended Bill 220291.
Thank you again, Madam Chair. I move that the amendment to Bill number 220291 be reported from this committee with a favorable recommendation, and further move that the rules of council be suspended to permit first reading of this bill at the next session of council.
Second.
Second.
The motion has been moved in second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Seeing none, it's been moved and properly second that the amended Bill 220291 be reported from this committee with a favorable recommendation, and further move that the rules of council be suspended to permit first reading at our next session. This concludes the business before this committee on appropriations today. I want to thank all the members for your attendance and your patience throughout this process. I want to thank the administration for their responses. We look forward to the pending responses related to this transfer ordinance. Thank you all very much, members.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you so much.
Thank you.